Okie dokie. We are up to the 2013-2014 season, and it hardly feels like history at this point, does it? Now, I did something interesting today. I did 1 through 8, even though the playoff format changes this year. Meaning, the playoff matchups, if it had been 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, everything would have been Boston, Detroit. That's what happened. Pittsburgh and Columbus. That's what happened right here. Tampa and Philly. Well, that ended up different. And Montreal and the Rangers. So there you go. Boston leads the conference at 54-19-9, followed by Pittsburgh 51-24-7, Tampa 46-27-9, Montreal 46-28-8, the Rangers 45-31-6, Philly 42-30-10, Columbus 42-32-7, and Detroit barely squeaking into the playoffs at 39-28-15, ahead of the Washington Capitals at 38-30-14. New Jersey Devils 35-29-18. The Ottawa Senators 37-31-14. Toronto 38-36-8. Columbus, or Carolina I should say, 36-35-11. The Islanders 34-37-11. Florida 29-45-8. And Buffalo 21-51-10. Disastrous year for them as they get ready to try for McDavid. But they'd end up with Eichel, which is a pretty good consolation prize. Out west, it would have been Anaheim and Dallas. And it was Anaheim and Dallas. It would have been Colorado and Minnesota, and that's what we got. St. Louis and LA. We got San Jose and LA. And it would have been San Jose and Chicago instead of St. Louis and Chicago. They're a minor difference. Anaheim finishes first at 54-20-8, followed by Colorado at 52-22-8. St. Louis 52-23-7, San Jose 51-22-9, Chicago 46-21-15, LA 48-28-8, the Minnesota Wild 43-27-12, and finally not falling out of the playoffs at the end of the year, Dallas at 40-31-11, though they won't last very long in the playoffs. Phoenix 37-30-15, now Arizona. I think that was the year they changed to Arizona. I'll just call them Arizona from here anyways, because I'm pretty sure it was the 13-14 season. Nashville 38-32-12, Winnipeg 37-35-10, Vancouver 36-35-11, Calgary 35-40-7, and Edmonton 29-44-9. It is impossible to miss that the bottom 4 teams in the West are all Canadian, and that 2 Eastern teams missed the playoffs from Canada as well, which leaves Montreal in the playoffs, which means that I wouldn't have wanted a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup. And I got asked that question a lot by Montreal fans that year of, well, yeah, but since Montreal's the only team in the playoffs, you'd like to see us win, wouldn't you? And I'm like, the Boston fan in me is laughing right now at you even having to ask that question. Now, let's take a look at leaders. Your overall leaders, Crosby, 104 points, 36 of those goals, 68 assists. Getzlaf, number 2 at 31 goals, 56 assists, 87 points. Claude Giroux, 28 goals, 58 assists, 86 points. Tyler Seguin, 37 goals, 47 assists, 84 points. Corey Perry, 43 goals, 39 assists, and 82 points. Phil Kessel, 37 goals, 43 assists, 80 points. This is when he's in Toronto and he's getting criticized a lot. And still, he's one of the top scorers. Taylor Hall, 27 goals, 53 assists for 80 points as well for the hapless Edmonton Oilers. Save percentage, I thought would be an interesting thing to look at from this season. Harding led the way with 933. Of course, he was forced to retire, but that 933 led the league that year in 29 games. Tuukka Rask 930. Varlamov and Price both had a 927 save percentage. Hudobin 926. Johnson 925, and Ben Bishop 924. Save percentage is an amazing number. It matters except when people say that it doesn't. So if somebody puts up a very good save percentage, they say, look, what a great goalie. Or, well, he had a good defense in front of him. Bad save percentage equals he's a bad goalie. Or, well, yeah, but look at the defense in front of him. So weird. Defense, Carlson led the way with 20 goals and 54 assists for 74 points. Miles ahead of Duncan Keith and his 6 goals and 55 assists for 61 points. Shea Weber, 23 goals, 33 assists, 56 points. Victor Hedman, 13 goals, 42 assists, 55 points. PK Subban, 10 goals, 43 assists, 53 points. And Keith Yandel is on the board at 8 goals, 45 assists, 53 points. Your trophy winners. Well, Art Ross went to Sidney Crosby. So did the Ted Lindsay Award, and so did the Hart. The Richard goes to Ovechkin, who had 51 goals that year and didn't end up scoring 80 points. So this is the I'll hold the puck. Good, I don't need to pass it. That's the era for Ovechkin that we're in. The Calder went to Nathan McKinnon. The Norris went to Duncan Keith. The Vezina went to Tuukka Rask. The Lady Byng went to Ryan O'Reilly. The Selke went to Patrice Bergeron. The Jack Adams for Coach of the Year went to Patrick Waugh, who took Colorado from way out of the playoffs to number 2 with 52 wins. They would not sustain that. The Jennings went to Jonathan Quick. The Conn Smythe went to Justin Williams, which is as off the map as it may get, but at the time, he was a perfectly fine recipient of the award. The Masterton went to Dominic Moore, and the Clancy went to Andrew Ference. So big stars getting those awards? Not that year. Now, regular season that saw continued regular season dominance by Anaheim. Boston's at the top, and it's just death when Boston's at the top. As a Bruins fan, I don't want them at the top because it means you're going to lose in the playoffs. If you go back through these history videos, you go back through any year that I've watched from 1981 until now, any year that Boston's at the top, they're going to lose. It's just the way it works. In the first round, however, as first in the Atlantic, they faced the wild card of Detroit, and they beat them in 5. And that was a pretty easy series. Wasn't one that made me lose a lot of sleep. Atlantic's 2 and 3, Tampa and Montreal. Montreal took out Tampa in 4. So one of the better playoffs for Carey Price, and a pretty solid season. He's going into what will be his great season, though. Pittsburgh, number 1 in the Metro, faces a wild card team in Columbus. Pittsburgh wins that series in 6. Columbus, of course, still looking for their first victory in a playoff series. The New York Rangers, number 2 in the Metro. Number 3 in the Metro was Philly. The Rangers win that one in 7. And it was a pretty solid back and forth playoff. Number 1 in the Central is Colorado. They face a wildcard team in Minnesota. And as predicted by many, Colorado have their downfall in the first round. They lose in 7. So all of the advanced stats geeks that say, yep, this team's just there's no foundation to it. They're not that good. After that first round defeat, and then what happens in 2015, they can feel pretty good about their predictions and about themselves. But at the time, and even now, I look at advanced stats as part of the picture, not the whole picture. Central Division 2 is St. Louis. Central Division 3 is Chicago. Chicago wins that one in 6. Because St. Louis and Chicago traditionally is a bad matchup for St. Louis. Anaheim, the number 1 team in the Pacific, manages to take out the wild card team of Dallas in the first round in 6. And I knew Dallas wasn't going to knock out Anaheim. I wasn't crazy that year. San Jose loses in 7 to the LA Kings. San Jose fans are probably still swearing about that one. Remember, you guys were up in that series, and you let LA off the hook. And you guys were up by a lot. And sort of like Philly Boston up. I don't want to go further because I know it's probably still fresh for San Jose fans. But anyways, LA wins it in 7. And it's a series that honestly should have gone San Jose's way, but shoulda, couldas, they don't really matter. In the end, LA wins that series, and it gives them momentum going forward. In the second round, Boston, the number 1 team in the Atlantic, faces number 3 team in the Atlantic, Montreal. And again, Boston-Montreal is a bad matchup for Boston. Right. And since Montreal's the home favorite, Montreal wins in 7. I'm still swearing about that one. Oh, and Montreal fans are, ask me every now and then, like, why don't you like Montreal? Look what they do. They go in and they win in Boston, which is downright rude. In the Metro, number 1 seeded Pittsburgh loses to number 2 seeded New York Rangers in 7. So I was happy. I was like, hey, at least Crosby isn't getting another cup. So, I can handle Boston not getting another one as long as Crosby's not getting another one, because you got to be petty if you're a hockey fan, right? You'll often hear that, like, yeah, my team didn't win, but those sons of over there, they better not win either. I can handle my guys not winning, but I swear, I'll set their building on fire. Okay, wild card Minnesota in the second round against number 3 team from the Central, Chicago. This is a mismatch in favor of Chicago. Chicago wins it in 6. And in the Pacific, number 1 seed Anaheim goes to Game 7 against LA, which means LA wins because Anaheim doesn't win Game 7s. It's not the way it works. It's followed Bruce Boudreau for years. It's just not the way it works. In the conference finals, The number 3 team in the Atlantic is Montreal. And they end up squaring off with the number 2 team in the Metro, the New York Rangers. And the Rangers win it in 6. So at least I didn't have to see Montreal go any further than against the Rangers. But still, I felt like if Boston had beaten Montreal, they would have had an excellent chance against the Rangers. Just crying shame. Because I felt like this was more wide open than it may have looked. You look now and you think, well, yeah, this was LA or Chicago. But I felt like Boston had a good chance. It's just they choked. So there you go. In the West, we had Chicago and LA, and this really felt like Stanley Cup Final. It really did. Both of them finished third in their division during the regular season, but it really felt like the Stanley Cup Final when these two teams met. LA ends up winning it in 7. Fantastic series all around. But in the end, LA had a little bit more than Chicago. And that's what matters. Then we go to the Stanley Cup Final, and it's the Rangers in LA. And you know what's funny is, for decades, I heard the league fix this playoffs. Whoever wins in the Stanley Cup Final, yeah, but that's what the NHL wanted. I heard it even going back to when the Oilers won their cups and the Islanders won theirs. Yeah, that's what the NHL wants. That's why they win. The NHL sets it up that way. I had always stated that if the NHL actually just wanted what was best for Americans and try to get the best ratings, the New York Rangers would face the Kings in the final. That would be your absolute number one because you got the biggest market on the West Coast, biggest market on the East Coast, and you match them up against each other. It's perfect. That Stanley Cup Final was an excellent Stanley Cup Final. The LA Kings win Game 1, 3-2. They win Game 2 in double overtime, 5-4. So if you're a Rangers fan coming out of that, you're like, well, we're 0-2, but at least we're in overtime. The games are close. We've just got to win one at home. Game 3 at home, though, LA wins 3-0 in Madison Square Garden. So LA up 3-0, and it's the same as it was in 2012. LA's up 3-0, but much like 2012, they lost Game 4. The Rangers win 2-1 at home. So there's some hope. And then Game 5, it felt like there's a lot of hope because it goes to overtime again, tied at 2. But in double overtime, the LA Kings would come through. They'd get that third goal. They'd win it in double OT. And if you're a Rangers fan, it's gutting because this really felt at the time, and now it definitely looks like it was the one chance for Henrik Lundqvist to get a Stanley Cup ring on his finger, to have that on his resume, and to have that extra little piece of what is needed to reach the Hall of Fame. I know he'll likely reach the Hall of Fame, but when you're a Stanley Cup winning goaltender, it's easier. Ask Curtis Joseph. Don't ask Chris Osgood, though, because he'll get all like twitchy-eyed. Playoff leaders. Your goals leader is Marian Gaborik with 14. That's right. That's only 4 years ago. Gaborik was the playoffs goals leader. And that's why he ended up with that large contract. That's how it happened. So we can look now and go, that contract, that's just crazy. Yeah, he played really, really well for LA, and it looked like he was back. Then he got his money, and then he wasn't back due to injury and just the fact he's gotten older. Assist leader is Kopitar with 21. Kopitar also leads with points with 26 in the playoffs. And your wins leader is Jonathan Quick with 16. Second is Lundqvist with 13. Notable is that for save percentage, Lundqvist had a 927 for the playoffs. Quick had a 911. So Quick's save percentage from that first Stanley Cup to this one, it's not even close. This was a Stanley Cup that the Kings won by committee. That's why Justin Williams ends up being their Conn Smythe winner. Williams came up in the big games, but there were heroes all around on that team. I may not have liked the LA Kings at that point, but I respected what they did. This was their second Stanley Cup in 3 years. It is their most recent Stanley Cup to date. They now have Kovalchuk added to a lot of the same players that were on this team that won the Cup in 2014, with the idea that they can get back and maybe win one in 2019. I'm not betting on it. However, that part of history hasn't been written yet. That being said, that's it for 13-14. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.